The call came out of nowhere. It was a stifling hot August afternoon. I'd just finished grocery shopping, and my car was packed with bags. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, the screen showing Cousin Martha. I was surprised Martha, and I didn't talk often. The last time I'd seen her was at a Christmas gathering 3 years ago. "Paul, I hope I'm not bothering you." Martha's voice was unusually tense, like a guitar string stretched too tight. "I need someone to house sit for a few days. A last-minute work opportunity came up on the West Coast. I have to fly out first thing tomorrow." I put down a jar of pasta sauce I was holding. "Of course, no problem. How long will you be gone?" "About a week." "The key will be under the doormat." She paused, and I heard the rustle of papers in the background. The house is old, so some noises are normal. Especially at night, the heating pipes make this clicking sound. I laughed, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I put milk in the fridge. "Martha, I'm not a kid, remember? I live in an old apartment building." "Right, of course." Her voice relaxed a little. "It's just, if you hear anything else, like footsteps or something, that's the dog next door. It runs around in the yard a lot." That addition was odd, but I didn't think much of it. Martha was always a bit high-strung, the type to use coasters under every glass. We chatted briefly about me remembering to water the roses in the backyard, before she hurriedly ended the call. Martha's house was in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, lined with tall oak trees. When I pulled up in my Ford truck on Saturday afternoon, the setting sun was painting the white clapboard walls gold. It was a classic mid-century home, with a wide front porch and green shutters. Just as she said, the key was under the mat. Inside, the place was almost unnervingly tidy. Every book was arranged by spine color. The couch cushions were plumped and perfectly aligned, and there wasn't a single water spot on the kitchen counters. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and a faint hint of flowers. I dropped my duffel bag in a corner of the living room and decided to look around. The house felt bigger than it looked from outside. A short hallway connected the living room to two bedrooms. Martha's room was at the far end, so I decided to use the guest room near the front. The bathroom was clean and bright, but the drip 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 from the faucet was loud in the silence. I tried to tighten it, but it was no use, probably one of those normal sounds Martha mentioned. The first night was uneventful. I ordered pizza, watched a baseball game on Martha's big TV, and went to bed around 10. The guest bed was comfortable, and I fell asleep quickly. Then, at 2:17 a.m., a sound woke me up. It wasn't the clicking of heating pipes, and it wasn't the neighbor's dog. It was a clear, rhythmic scraping sound coming from the kitchen. Over and over, like someone lightly dragging a fingernail across a wooden surface. I lay in bed, my heart pounding, maybe a tree branch scratching a window. I quietly got up, tiptoed to the bedroom door, and pushed it open a crack. The hallway was pitch black, but there was a faint light coming from the kitchen direction. I was sure I'd turned all the lights off. The scraping stopped, replaced by another sound, a soft, almost inaudible humming. No melody, just a repetition of a few notes, drifting faintly. "Martha," I whispered, my voice sounding ridiculously loud in the silence. All sounds stopped instantly. The light vanished, plunging the kitchen into darkness. I stood there for a moment, my palms sweaty, then took a deep breath and walked to the hallway switch to turn on the light. The kitchen was empty. The sink was dry, chairs were pushed neatly under the table, the back door was locked. I checked every room, including the basement and closets. Nothing. When I returned to the kitchen, I noticed a small puddle of water on the floor near the fridge, shaped like a faint footprint. I wiped it up with a paper towel, blaming it on fridge condensation. Sunday was bright and sunny, the birdsong making the previous night's events seem absurd. I watered the roses, then drove to a nearby gas station convenience store for coffee and a donut. All day, I tried to convince myself it was just a half-dream, but that evening, As I watched TV in the living room, the feeling of being watched was so strong I couldn't ignore it. It wasn't a scary feeling, more like a quiet, persistent attention coming from the hallway. I looked up several times, but there was never anything there. Monday I went to work. I'd taken Friday off to have a long weekend. All day, my mind kept drifting back to the house, and I was almost reluctant to go back after work. But when I unlocked the door, the evening sun was streaming through the windows, and everything looked warm and normal. I decided to cook a simple meal to settle my nerves. Pulling hamburger meat and veggies from the fridge, I noticed a subtle change in the arrangement of the magnets on the fridge door. The letters that had spelled hello now read Holly. I frowned at it. Was Martha the type to rearrange magnets into nonsense words? Maybe they got bumped during cleaning. I put them back. That night, the sounds returned. This time, it wasn't scraping, but a low mumbling coming from Martha's bedroom. It sounded like someone talking indistinctly in their sleep. I stood in the hallway, phone in hand, ready to dial 911, but the sound held no threat. It was just persistent, with a strangely sad rhythm. I didn't go in to check. A strong gut feeling told me not to open that door. I retreated to the guest room, locked the door, and shoved a chair under the doorknob. Useless in reality, but it made me feel slightly better. Tuesday morning, I looked for clues on Martha's bookshelf. Most were cookbooks and novels, but under a stack of magazines, I found an old photo album. It was filled with childhood family photos, picnics, birthday parties, summer vacations at the beach. Martha was always on the edge, with a strained smile. One photo caught my eye, 10-year-old Martha holding a ragged cloth doll, standing on the front porch of this very house. Her eyes weren't empty, but held a complexity I couldn't understand as a kid, not fear, more like a resigned sadness. As I turned the page, a yellowed slip of paper fluttered out. It was in Martha's teenage handwriting, a short poem, a voice in the silence, footsteps on the floor. Who walks in the empty room / when the moon rises? It only wants to be heard. It only doesn't want to be alone. I stared at the words, goosebumps rising on my skin. This wasn't Martha's usual poetry about flowers and rain. I grabbed my phone to call her, but remembered she said she might be unreachable during work. That afternoon, I decided to feel out the neighbor. An elderly, kindly woman named Mrs. Hawkins was pruning roses in her front yard next door. I introduced myself as Martha's cousin, house sitting. Martha's a good neighbor, very quiet, Mrs. Hawkins said, pushing her glasses up her nose. This house has been in her family 4 generations, you know. Her grandmother lived her whole life here. I asked casually, hear any strange noises at night? Just wondering what's normal for an old house, Mrs. Hawkins paused her pruning. Old houses always have their own personalities, don't they? Martha's grandmother was quite lonely in her later years. She'd often talk to herself, or to people who weren't there. The caregiver said it's common for people living alone. Did she pass away in the house? I asked carefully. Oh, yes, peacefully, in her sleep. Martha had just moved back to care for her. Mrs. Hawkins snipped a rose and handed it to me. Here, dear. This variety was Martha's grandmother's favorite. Back inside, I put the rose in a glass of water, thinking about the conversation, the ghost of a lonely old woman. It seemed plausible, but it felt wrong. The sounds weren't malicious, but they didn't feel like friendly visits either. Tuesday night, things changed. I'd just gotten out of the shower, and was drying my hair when I heard clear footsteps in the living room. Not random noises, but purposeful steps, from the fireplace to the sofa. A pause, then a turn toward the bookshelf. I tightened my bathrobe, my heart hammering, but a strange curiosity overpowered the fear. I crept to the living room doorway. The lights were off, but moonlight through the windows provided enough illumination. The room was empty, but the footsteps continued now from the bookshelf toward the dining room. I flipped the light switch. The footsteps stopped. but in the instant the light came on, I clearly saw one of the sofa cushions depress, as if someone had just stood up from it. Then, slowly, the dent smoothed itself out. I didn't run or scream. Instead, I felt a surge of sympathy. Whatever this was, it didn't seem to want to hurt me. It was just repeating some kind of daily routine. "Hello," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I'm Paul, Martha's cousin. I'm watching the house for her." There was no answer, but the air seemed to vibrate slightly. The temperature dropped a few degrees. On Wednesday, I decided to try communicating. After work, I bought a simple notebook and pen, and left it on the coffee table. Next to it, I left a note. "If you want to talk, you can write here." That night, I pretended to sleep but stayed alert. Around 1 a.m., the footsteps started again, clearer this time. I heard the sound of pages turning not violently, but gently, like someone reading. Then came the sound of writing, the faint scratch of a pencil on paper. I waited until the sound stopped before venturing out. The notebook was open. On the page was a single line of shaky handwriting, unlike Martha's, more old-fashioned and slanted. "Thank you for the company. The loneliness has been long." Tears welled up in my eyes, for some reason. This wasn't a demon from a horror movie. This was a lonely presence, craving to be acknowledged. Thursday night, I left my bedroom door open. Footsteps paced the hallway, but never entered my room. Sometimes I'd speak softly, things like "It's quiet tonight" or "Martha will be back this weekend." There was no direct response, but I could feel a calm, listening presence. Friday morning, I packed my bag to leave. Martha was returning that afternoon. I wrote a final message in the notebook. "It was nice to meet you. Take care." As I set the pen down, a book fell from the shelf onto the floor. I picked it up. It was an old book of poetry. It was open to a page, with a poem about memory and forgetting. When I left, the house felt different. No longer just Martha's tidy, silent home, but a place with life and history. Martha called Saturday morning to thank me. Was everything okay? The house wasn't too noisy, was it? "It was fine," I said, hesitating. "Martha, what was your grandmother like?" There was a pause on the other end. She was a complicated woman. Very lonely at the end, but she insisted on staying home. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I found some of her old things." "Paul," Martha's voice turned cautious, "if you noticed anything unusual in the house, don't worry about it. It's just the house settling. Grandma always said every home has its own heartbeat." I didn't press further. Some secrets belong to the house and its inhabitants. A month later, Martha called again. Her voice sounded different, lighter, almost happy. "You'll never believe it," she said. "I met someone. It's getting serious. He's moving in next month." I smiled. "That's great, Martha. I'm really happy for you." "It's strange. It feels like Grandma's blessing," she continued. "The house feels different lately, warmer. Maybe I'm finally ready to move on." After I hung up, I thought about the old house and its silent echoes. Maybe some presences don't need to be banished, just heard. And Martha's loneliness, like her grandmother's, had finally found a way to have company.